The stagecoach rattled into Colorado City, Colorado on a blistering afternoon in late June of 1878, and Emma Katherine Brennan stumbled out onto the dusty street with nothing but a carpetbag, $17, and a letter from a man she had never met. She had traveled over 1,000 miles from Philadelphia, where her father's gambling debts had finally caught up with the family in the most devastating way possible. Her parents were dead, shot in their own parlor by men who did not care that her mother had been an innocent bystander. Emma had hidden in the cellar during the entire ordeal, and when she emerged hours later, everything she had known was gone. The letter had arrived 3 days after the funeral, written by her late mother's cousin who owned a boarding house in this remote Colorado town. It promised work, a roof over her head, and a fresh start. Emma was 22 years old, and she had nothing left to lose. The streets of Colorado City were wide and dusty, lined with wooden buildings that seemed to lean slightly in the relentless wind that swept down from the mountains. She could see Pikes Peak rising in the distance, majestic and somehow forbidding. Women in sun-faded dresses hurried along the wooden walkways, shielding their faces from the dust, while men on horseback moved through the street with the casual confidence of people who belonged here. Emma felt entirely out of place in her black morning dress, which was far too heavy for this climate and already damp with perspiration. She clutched the letter and made her way toward the address written at the top. The boarding house was supposed to be on 2nd Street, near the general store. As she walked, people stared at her with open curiosity. Newcomers always drew attention in small towns, she supposed. A group of cowboys lounged outside a saloon, and one of them called out something she could not quite hear. She kept her eyes forward and quickened her pace. The building she sought turned out to be a weathered 2-story structure with a sagging porch. Emma climbed the steps and knocked on the door, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. What if her mother's cousin had changed her mind? What if there was no work after all? She waited, listening to the sounds of the town around her, the neighing of horses, the creak of wagon wheels, the distant sound of a piano being played badly. The door opened, and a thin woman with graying hair and suspicious eyes looked her up and down. "Yes, I am Emma Brennan. I received a letter from Mrs. Dorothy Hanson. I believe this is her establishment." The woman's expression did not soften. "Mrs. Hanson passed away 2 weeks ago." Heart gave out. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "I see. I am sorry to hear that. You are family then." "My mother was her cousin." The woman considered this for a moment, then shook her head. "The boarding house is being sold. New owner takes possession next week. I am just here clearing out her things. There is no work for you here, girl. You had best find somewhere else." The door closed before Emma could respond. She stood on the porch, staring at the peeling paint, trying to comprehend what had just happened. She had spent every penny she had on the journey west. She had $17 left, and she knew no one in this town. She could not go back to Philadelphia. There was nothing to go back to. Emma descended the steps slowly, trying to think. She needed to find work immediately, and she needed somewhere to stay. The sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Despite her situation, she could not help but notice how beautiful it was here, how different from the crowded, dirty streets of the city she had left behind. She walked back toward the main street, looking for any sign that might indicate a business that needed help. There was the general store, a blacksmith, a livery stable, the saloon, a small church, and what appeared to be a restaurant. She tried the general store first. The proprietor, a stout man with impressive mutton chops, listened to her inquiry and shook his head. "Got all the help I need." "You might try the restaurant. Mrs. Chen sometimes needs girls to help with the washing up." The restaurant was a narrow building squeezed between the saloon and a dry goods store. Emma pushed open the door and found herself in a small dining room with 6 tables covered in checkered cloths. The smell of cooking meat made her stomach clench with hunger. She had not eaten since early that morning. A Chinese woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She regarded Emma with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You want food?" "I am looking for work, actually." "I was told you might need help." Mrs. Chen looked her over carefully. "You cook?" "Yes, madam, and I can clean, do laundry, anything you need." "Where you from?" "Philadelphia." "Long way." "Why you come here?" Emma hesitated, then decided honesty was probably the best approach. "I had family here, but she passed away recently. I need work and a place to stay." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. "I give you trial. 3 days, you work hard, you can stay. I pay $5 a week plus meals. You sleep in the back room. Very small, just a cot." Relief washed over Emma so powerfully that tears sprang to her eyes. Thank you so much. I will work very hard, I promise." "You start now. Put your bag in the back room and come help me. Dinner rush starts soon." The back room turned out to be little more than a closet with a narrow cot, a wash basin, and a hook on the wall for her clothes. But it was shelter, and Emma was grateful. She changed out of her heavy morning dress into a simpler cotton dress, tied an apron around her waist, and went to work. The dinner rush was chaotic and exhausting. Mrs. Chen ran the kitchen with fierce efficiency, cooking meals on a large iron stove while barking instructions in a mixture of English and Chinese. Emma washed dishes, served food, cleaned tables, and tried to remember which customer had ordered what. The diners were mostly men, cowboys and miners and railroad workers, all hungry and loud and not particularly interested in niceties. But they paid for their meals and left tips, small coins that Mrs. Chen told Emma to keep. By the time the last customer left, Emma was so tired she could barely stand. Her hands were red and raw from the hot water and harsh soap. Her feet ached. But she had made it through her first day, and Mrs. Chen seemed satisfied with her work. "You do okay," the older woman said, which Emma sensed was high praise. "Tomorrow you come early. We start breakfast at 6. Emma fell onto the cot that night still wearing her dress, too exhausted even to properly undress. She was asleep within seconds. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hard work and learning. Emma woke before dawn each day to help prepare breakfast. She learned how Mrs. Chen liked things organized, learned the names of the regular customers, learned which ones to watch out for and which ones were harmless. The work was relentless, but Emma threw herself into it with determination. This was her chance to build a new life, and she was not going to waste it. It was on a Thursday morning in mid-July that Max Quinn first walked into the restaurant. Emma noticed him immediately, though she could not have said exactly why. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His boots were scuffed and dusty. There was nothing particularly remarkable about him, except for the way he moved with a kind of quiet confidence, and the way his dark eyes seemed to take in everything at once. He sat down at one of the corner tables and waited patiently until Emma came over with a cup of coffee. "Good morning," she said. "What can I get for you?" He looked up at her, and she noticed that his eyes were actually a very dark brown, almost black. "Morning. I will have eggs, bacon, and biscuits, please." His voice was deep and quiet with just a hint of a southern accent. Emma wrote down the order and turned to go, but he spoke again. "You are new in town." It was a statement, not a question. Emma turned back. "Yes, sir. I arrived a few weeks ago." He nodded as if this confirmed something he had already suspected, from back east by the sound of it. Philadelphia, long way from home. This is my home now, Emma said, and was surprised by the certainty in her own voice. Something flickered in his expression, might have been approval or just acknowledgement. Well, welcome to Colorado City, then. Thank you. She hesitated, then added, I am Emma Brennan, Maxwell Quinn. People call me Max. It is nice to meet you, Mr. Quinn. Just Max is fine. She brought him his breakfast a few minutes later, and he ate in silence, reading a newspaper that someone had left behind. When he was finished, he left payment on the table along with a generous tip and walked out without another word. Emma watched him go, curious despite herself. Mrs. Chen noticed. That is Max Quinn. Good man. Owns ranch outside of town. He comes in once a week, always Thursday morning. He seems quiet. He is alone too much, I think. His father died 3 years ago, left him the ranch. Max works hard, keeps to himself mostly. Mrs. Chen gave Emma a knowing look. He is not married. Emma felt her cheeks warm. I was just making conversation. Mrs. Chen made a non-committal sound and returned to the kitchen. Max did indeed come in every Thursday morning after that, always sitting at the same corner table, always ordering the same thing. He was polite and quiet, and after that first conversation, he said little beyond giving his order and thanking Emma when she brought his food. But she found herself looking forward to Thursday mornings, and she began to notice small things about him. The way he always held the door open for anyone coming in behind him. The way he was patient with old Mr. Peterson, who was hard of hearing and always took forever to order. The way his hands, calloused and scarred from years of ranch work, were always clean when he came to town. Summer deepened into August, and the heat became oppressive. Emma learned to appreciate the cool mornings and late evenings, when the temperature finally dropped to something bearable. She had settled into a rhythm in Colorado City, and though her life was far different from anything she had imagined for herself back in Philadelphia, she found a certain satisfaction in the work and in her growing independence. One Thursday morning, Max came in looking more tired than usual. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he moved with the stiffness of someone who had been working too hard for too long. Emma poured his coffee and asked, "Are you all right, Mr. Quinn?" He looked up, surprised by the question. "Just busy. We are bringing in the hay, and I am short-handed. My only ranch hand quit last week to try his luck in the gold fields. Is there much gold to be found around here? Not really, but that does not stop men from looking." He took a sip of his coffee. "How are you settling in? Colorado must be quite different from Philadelphia." "Very different. But I like it here. People have been kind. Mrs. Chen treating you well?" "Yes, very well. She is a good employer," Max nodded. "She is tough but fair. Her husband died 5 years ago. She has run this place alone ever since. People respect that." Emma brought him his breakfast, and as she set the plate down, she noticed the cuts and scrapes on his hands. "You have hurt yourself." He glanced down at his hands as if noticing the injuries for the first time. "Hazards of ranch work. It is nothing." But Emma frowned. Some of those cuts looked deep, and one appeared to be getting infected. "You should clean those properly and bandage them." "Yes, madam," he said, with just the hint of amusement in his voice. She felt herself blush again. "I am sorry. I do not mean to be bossy." "No, you are right. I will take care of it." But the following Thursday, his hands looked even worse. Emma could not help herself. After he had finished eating, she brought over a basin of warm water, clean cloths, and some salve that Mrs. Chen kept in the kitchen for burns and cuts. "What is this?" Max asked, looking puzzled. "You clearly have not been taking care of your hands, so I am going to do it for you. Hold them out." For a moment she thought he might refuse, but then he extended his hands palm up over the table. Emma sat down across from him and gently cleaned the cuts, wiping away dirt and dried blood. His hands were larger than hers, rough and work-worn, and she could feel the calluses on his palms. He did not flinch, even when she cleaned the deeper cuts that must have stung. "You did not need to do this," he said quietly. "I know. But infection is serious, especially out here. You cannot work if you are sick." She applied the salve and wrapped clean cloths around the worst of the cuts. The whole time she was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the way he was watching her face as she worked. When she finished, she looked up and found him staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Thank you," he said. "That was very kind of you. You are welcome." He stood to leave, then hesitated. "Miss Brennan, I wonder if I might ask you something." "Of course. I know you work here most days, but do you ever have any free time? I mean, an afternoon off, perhaps?" Emma felt her heart begin to beat faster. "I have Sunday afternoons off. Mrs. Chen closes the restaurant after lunch on Sundays. Would you consider taking a ride with me this Sunday? I could show you some of the area. The scenery is beautiful up in the foothills." She knew she should probably refuse. She barely knew this man. But there was something in his eyes, a gentleness and sincerity that made her want to say yes. "I would like that very much." His face broke into a smile, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his entire appearance. "I will come by at 2 o'clock if that suits you." "That would be perfect." He touched the brim of his hat and left, and Emma found herself smiling for the rest of the day. Mrs. Chen noticed, of course, and gave her another one of those knowing looks, but said nothing. Sunday arrived hot and clear. Emma dressed in her best summer dress, a pale blue cotton that had once belonged to her mother. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up, then felt foolish for taking so much care with her appearance. But when Max arrived at precisely 2 o'clock driving a wagon with 2 horses, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her made all the effort worthwhile. He helped her up onto the wagon seat, and they set off through town and out into the open countryside. The landscape was stunning. Rolling grasslands stretched out in every direction, dotted with scrub oak and pine. The mountains rose up to the west, their peaks still holding patches of snow even in late summer. The sky was a brilliant, endless blue that Emma had never seen in Philadelphia, where coal smoke always seemed to dim the heavens. Max drove with easy competence, the reins loose in his hands. "I thought we would head up toward Garden of the Gods. Have you heard of it?" "No, what is it?" "A formation of red rock, very striking. I think you will like it." They talked as they drove, at first about simple things, the weather, the town, the people Emma had met. But gradually the conversation deepened. Max told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father who had been a hard but fair man, about the challenges of running a cattle operation in this sometimes harsh land. Emma found herself telling him things she had not told anyone else, about her parents' deaths, about the fear and uncertainty that had driven her west, about her determination to make a new life for herself. "That takes courage," Max said quietly. "Coming out here alone, starting over with nothing." "I did not have much choice." "There is always a choice. You could have stayed in Philadelphia, could have tried to find work there, but you chose to take a chance on something unknown. That is courage." Emma had never thought of it that way. She had just done what she had to do to survive. But sitting here next to this quiet, thoughtful man, seeing herself through his eyes, she felt a flicker of pride. They reached the Garden of the Gods just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. The red rocks glowed in the golden light, fantastic formations that looked as if giants had been playing with stone and left their toys scattered across the landscape. Max helped Emma down from the wagon, and they walked among the rocks, dwarfed by the towering formations. "It is beautiful," Emma breathed. I have never seen anything like it. I used to come here as a boy, Max said. My father would bring me when we needed to check on cattle in this area. I always felt like this place was special, like it existed outside of regular time somehow. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, just taking in the beauty around them. Emma felt something shifting inside her, some hard knot of grief and fear that had been lodged in her chest since her parents died beginning to loosen. Here in this vast and beautiful place, her troubles seemed smaller, more manageable. As they walked back to the wagon, Max said, "I would like to do this again if you would be willing. Perhaps next Sunday. I would like that very much." The drive back to town passed too quickly. When Max helped her down from the wagon in front of the restaurant, his hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming with me today," he said. "I enjoyed your company. Thank you for showing me such a beautiful place." He touched his hat brim and climbed back onto the wagon, and Emma watched until he had driven out of sight. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Max came for breakfast every Thursday, and they would talk while Emma worked, snatched conversations between serving other customers and refilling coffee cups. Then on Sundays he would pick her up in his wagon, and they would drive out into the countryside, exploring different areas, talking about everything and nothing. Emma learned about the ranch, about Max's dreams of expanding his herd, about the constant challenges of drought and harsh winters and cattle rustlers. Max learned about Emma's childhood in Philadelphia, about her love of reading, about the education her parents had scrimped and saved to give her. As summer turned to autumn, the aspen trees in the mountains began to turn gold, splashing color across the dark green of the pine forests. The nights grew cooler, and Emma needed a shawl when she walked home late at night from the restaurant. She had been in Colorado City for 3 months now, and it truly felt like home. One Sunday in late September, Max drove her out to see his ranch. Emma had been curious about it for weeks, trying to picture where he lived, what his home looked like. The ranch was about 5 miles outside of town, nestled in a valley with good grazing land and a creek that ran year-round. Max told her with evident pride. The house itself was a modest wooden structure, weathered by wind and sun, with a front porch that sagged slightly on one side. There was a barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals. It was not grand, but there was something appealing about its sturdy simplicity. "It is not much," Max said, sounding almost apologetic. "My father built it 30 years ago. I keep meaning to make improvements, but there is always so much work to do." "I think it is wonderful," Emma said honestly. "It looks like a real home." Max showed her around the property, introducing her to his horses and the dozen head of cattle currently in the near pasture. Emma was charmed by everything, even the chickens scratching in the dirt near the coop. When they went inside the house, Emma immediately noticed how sparse and masculine the interior was. There was a main room with a fireplace, a simple kitchen area, and 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. The furniture was handmade and functional rather than decorative. It was clean but stark, clearly the home of a man who spent most of his time outdoors. "I am not much of a housekeeper," Max admitted. "I keep things clean, but that is about all." "It is a good house," Emma said. "Strong and well built." They sat on the porch as the sun began to set, drinking coffee that Max had brewed. Emma felt entirely at peace, more content than she had been in months. Sitting here with Max, watching the sky turn pink and gold over the mountains, felt right in a way she could not quite articulate. "Emma," Max said suddenly, his voice serious, "I need to ask you something." She turned to look at him, her heart beginning to beat faster. "Yes." He seemed to be struggling for words, which was unusual for him. "These past few months, Getting to know you, spending time with you, it has meant more to me than I can properly express. I have been alone for a long time and I got used to it. But now I cannot imagine going back to that. I cannot imagine Sundays without you. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I feel the same way. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and gentle around hers. I know it is early. I know we have not known each other very long, but I am sure of my feelings. I think I have been falling in love with you since the first morning you served me breakfast. Max, she whispered. I am not a rich man, Emma. I can offer you a hard life, a lot of work, and a ranch that always seems to need more than I can give it. But I can also offer you my whole heart, my complete devotion, and a promise that I will do everything in my power to make you happy. Would you consider being my wife? The tears were flowing freely now. Emma had never expected this, had not let herself hope for this. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. He pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and sweet, and Emma felt as if she had finally come home. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Colorado City, with Mrs. Chen and a few of the regular customers from the restaurant in attendance. Emma wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, and Max wore a new shirt and his best boots. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Emma felt as if her new life was truly beginning. The reality of married life on a ranch came as something of a shock to Emma, despite Max's warnings. The work was endless and exhausting. There were animals to feed, eggs to collect, meals to cook, clothes to wash, a garden to tend, and that was just the household work. Max often asked for her help with the ranch work too, and Emma found herself learning to mend fences, move cattle, and do a dozen other tasks she had never imagined doing. But there were moments of beauty too. Waking up next to Max in the pre-dawn darkness, feeling the warmth of his body next to hers. Sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the stars come out over the mountains. The way Max would come in from a long day of work and pull her into his arms, holding her as if she was the most precious thing in the world. Winter arrived early that year. By mid-November, snow was falling regularly, and the temperatures dropped well below freezing. Max worked from dawn to dusk, making sure the animals were fed and sheltered, that there was enough firewood cut, that the house was ready for the long winter ahead. Emma did her best to help, but she was still learning, still making mistakes. One particularly bitter evening in early December, Max came in from the barn covered in snow, his face red with cold. Emma had dinner ready, a thick stew and fresh bread, and she hurried to help him out of his frozen coat and boots. They ate in front of the fire, and afterward, Max pulled her close on the sofa they had bought in town the previous week. I have been thinking, he said slowly. Winter is going to be hard this year. I can feel it. The animals are going to need constant attention, and the weather is only going to get worse. What are you saying? I am saying that I might need to sleep in the barn sometimes. To keep watch over the animals, make sure they stay warm enough, make sure nothing goes wrong. Emma pulled back to look at him. Sleep in the barn, but it is freezing out there. I have done it before. I can bundle up, keep a fire going in the small stove out there. I will be fine. Absolutely not. You will freeze to death. Emma, the animals represent everything we have. If something happens to them, we lose the ranch. I need to protect them. She could see the determination in his eyes and knew there was no point arguing. Then I will sleep out there with you. No, you will not. You will stay here in the warm house where you belong. If you are sleeping in the barn, so am I. We are married, Max. We stay together. They argued about it for an hour, neither willing to give in. Finally, Max said, All right, here is my compromise. If things get really bad, If a storm comes through or the temperature drops dangerously low, I will sleep in the barn to watch over the animals. But you will stay in the house where it is warm and safe. I could not live with myself if something happened to you." Emma wanted to argue more, but she could see how worried he was, how much responsibility he felt for their livelihood. "Fine, but I do not like it," Julie noted. The first time Max slept in the barn was a week later when a major snowstorm blew through. Emma lay alone in their bed, listening to the wind howl around the house, worrying herself sick about her husband out there in the cold. She barely slept all night, and when Max came in the next morning, his lips were blue and his whole body was shaking with cold. She wrapped him in blankets and made him sit by the fire while she heated water for coffee and breakfast. "Never again," she said fiercely. "You are not doing that again." But he did do it again, and again. As winter deepened and the temperatures plummeted, Max spent more and more nights in the barn. Emma hated it. She hated sleeping alone, hated worrying about him, hated the way he looked each morning when he came in, exhausted and frozen. One morning in late January, after Max had spent 3 nights in a row in the barn during a particularly brutal cold snap, Emma confronted him. "This cannot continue. You are going to make yourself sick. The animals need me. I need you too. I am your wife, Max. I need you here in the house in our bed. Emma, please try to understand. I do understand. I understand that you care more about the cattle than you care about me." She knew as soon as the words left her mouth that they were unfair, but she was too tired and frustrated to take them back. Max looked as if she had slapped him. "You know that is not true. Do I? Because from where I am standing, it certainly seems like you would rather be out in the barn than here with me. That is not fair, Emma. I am doing this for us, for our future. Everything we have is tied up in this ranch. And what good will our future be if you freeze to death trying to protect it?" They stared at each other, both hurt and angry, and then Max turned and walked out. Emma heard the barn door slam and felt tears streaming down her face. This was their first real fight, and it felt terrible. Max did not come in for breakfast. He did not come in for lunch. By mid-afternoon, Emma was worried enough to bundle up and trudge through the snow to the barn. She found him mucking out stalls, working with fierce concentration, not looking up when she entered. "Max, I am sorry. I should not have said what I said. You meant it." "No, I did not. I was tired and scared and I lashed out. I know you are doing this because you care about our future. I know you are trying to protect what we have built. I am just so worried about you." He finally looked up and she could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "I am worried about you too. I hate leaving you alone in the house. I hate being away from you, but I do not see another choice." Emma moved closer, reaching up to touch his face. "Then let me help more. Let me take on more of the ranch work so you do not have to do everything yourself. You already do so much. I can do more. We are partners, Max. We are supposed to face these things together." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am sorry too. I should have talked to you more about why I felt I needed to do this. I should not have just made the decision on my own." "We are still learning how to be married," Emma said against his chest. "We will make mistakes, but we will figure it out together." They went back to the house hand in hand, and that night they made love with a tenderness and intensity that made Emma feel as if they were renewing their vows, recommitting to each other and to their shared life. But Max still slept in the barn when he felt it was necessary. Emma hated it, but she tried to be understanding. She made sure he had extra blankets, that he had hot food before he went out, that he knew she loved him even when she was frustrated with his choices. February was brutal. The snow piled up in drifts taller than Emma, and the wind cut through every gap in the house's walls. Max spent more nights in the barn than in the house, and Emma could see the toll it was taking on him. He was losing weight, always tired, moving like an old man instead of someone who had just turned 28. One morning, Emma woke to silence. The wind had finally stopped. She got up and looked out the window to see the sun rising over a landscape of pristine white snow. It was beautiful and deadly. She dressed quickly and started a fire, then began making breakfast, expecting Max to come in at any moment. But he did not come. An hour passed, then two. Emma was starting to seriously worry when she finally heard the barn door open. But when Max came through the door, she gasped. His face was gray, his eyes glassy. He was shaking so hard he could barely walk. "Max, what is wrong?" "Just cold," he managed to say through chattering teeth. "Could not keep the fire going. Ran out of wood." Emma rushed to him, helping him to the chair by the fire. His clothes were damp with melted snow, and when she touched his hands, they were like ice. "You are freezing. We need to get you warm right now." She stripped off his wet clothes, ignoring his weak protests, and wrapped him in every blanket she could find. She heated water and made him drink hot coffee, then hot soup. Gradually, the shaking subsided, and some color returned to his face. But Emma could see that he was sick. His eyes were too bright, and when she touched his forehead, he was burning with fever. "You are going to bed," she said firmly. "Right now. The animals, I will take care of the animals. You are going to rest and get well." Max was too sick to argue. Emma got him into bed, piling more blankets on top of him, and then she bundled up and went out to the barn. She had helped Max enough times that she knew what needed to be done. She fed the horses and the cattle, made sure they all had water, collected eggs from the chickens. It took her twice as long as it would have taken Max, and by the time she was finished, she was exhausted and frozen. But the animals were cared for. She went back inside to check on Max and found him sleeping fitfully, his face flushed with fever. Emma made more soup, keeping it warm on the stove, and sat by the bed, wiping his face with cool cloths when the fever made him restless. The next 3 days were a nightmare. Max's fever climbed higher, and he became delirious, mumbling about the cattle, about his father, about things Emma could not understand. She forced him to drink water and eat what little he could manage. She kept the fire going and the house warm. She went out twice a day to care for the animals, struggling through the snow and the cold, driven by determination and fear. If Max woke up and found that the animals had suffered because of his illness, it would devastate him. On the 4th day, the fever finally broke. Max woke up lucid for the first time, weak as a kitten but recognizably himself. "Emma," she was at his side immediately. "I am here. How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a whole herd of cattle." He looked around the room, then at her. "How long have I been sick?" 3 days. "The animals are fine. I have been taking care of them." He stared at her in disbelief. "You have been doing all the barn work, by yourself?" "Yes, and I will continue to do it until you are well enough to help again." "Emma, that is too much. You cannot." "I can, and I did." "Now stop worrying and focus on getting better." Tears filled his eyes. "I am sorry. I am sorry I pushed myself so hard. Sorry I got sick. Sorry you had to do everything alone." Emma climbed into the bed beside him carefully, mindful of his weakened state. "You do not need to apologize. You were trying to take care of us. But Max, we almost lost you, and if we had lost you, what good would the ranch have been? You are more important than any number of cattle. You have to promise me that you will never push yourself like that again." "I promise," he whispered, pulling her close. "I love you so much, Emma. I love you too." It took another week before Max was strong enough to do even light work, and 2 more weeks after that before he was back to his normal strength. By then, March had arrived and the worst of the winter was behind them. The snow began to melt, revealing the brown earth beneath, and the days grew longer and warmer. One evening in late March, Max and Emma sat on the porch watching the sun set. It had been a good day. The cattle were healthy, having survived the brutal winter. The chickens were laying again. The first green shoots were appearing in Emma's garden. They had made it through. "I have been thinking," Max said, his arm around Emma's shoulders. "When I was sick, when I thought I might die, all I could think about was you. About how much I love you, about how grateful I am that you came into my life. The ranch is important, but you are everything. I lost sight of that this winter, and it nearly destroyed us both." "We both learned things this winter," Emma said softly. "I learned that I am stronger than I thought I was, that I can do hard things when I have to, but I also learned that we are stronger together than either of us is alone. I still cannot believe you took care of the ranch by yourself while I was sick. That was incredible, Emma. I did what needed to be done, just like you have been doing since your father died." Max was quiet for a moment, then said, "I need to tell you something about why I was sleeping in the barn all those nights. You wanted to protect the animals. I understand that. That was part of it. But there was more to it than that." He took a deep breath. "When my father died, he left the ranch to me, but it came with debts, a lot of debts. I have been working for 3 years to pay them off, and I am almost there. But if I lost even a few head of cattle, if something went wrong, I could lose everything. The pressure of that, the fear of failing, of losing what my father built, it made me a little crazy. I could not stand the thought of letting him down, of letting you down." Emma turned to look at him. "Why did you not tell me this before?" "I did not want you to worry. I did not want you to think you had married a man who could not even hold onto his family's ranch. Max, I did not marry you for your ranch. I married you because I love you, because you are kind and decent and hardworking. Because you make me feel safe and cherished. A ranch cannot do any of those things. I know. And I should have trusted you enough to share the burden. I should have been honest about how much pressure I was under. From now on, we share everything, the good and the bad, the successes and the failures. We are partners in this life, Max, true partners." He kissed her then, deep and loving, and Emma felt a profound sense of peace. They had been through so much in these few months of marriage, had faced challenges that might have broken a weaker couple. But they had come through it together, and they were stronger for it. April brought warmth and new life to the ranch. The cattle had calves, and Emma was enchanted by the wobbly-legged babies following their mothers around the pasture. The garden began to flourish under her careful tending. Max hired a new ranch hand, a young man named Charlie who was eager to learn and willing to work hard. With Charlie's help, Max was no longer overwhelmed by the workload, and he spent more time with Emma, teaching her about the ranch, listening to her ideas for improvements. One afternoon in early May, Emma was working in the garden when she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She sat back on her heels, waiting for it to pass, but it only intensified. She barely made it to the edge of the garden before she was sick. Max came running from the barn, concern etched on his face. "Emma, what is wrong?" "I do not know. I just felt ill all of a sudden." He helped her into the house and made her lie down. The nausea passed after a while, but Emma felt shaky and weak. Over the next few days, the same thing happened each morning. She would wake feeling fine, then be violently ill within an hour. It was Mrs. Chen, who Emma had remained friends with and who visited occasionally, who figured it out. She came out to the ranch one Sunday and found Emma green-faced and miserable. "You are pregnant," she said matter-of-factly. Emma stared at her. "What? No, I cannot be. I am just ill." Morning sickness. Classic sign. "You probably 3 months along, maybe more." Emma did the math in her head and realized it was possible. More than possible, likely. She looked at Max, who had gone pale. We are going to have a baby, Mrs. Chen laughed. Yes, probably in late October, early November. Congratulations. After Mrs. Chen left, Emma and Max sat together in stunned silence. A baby, Max finally said. We are going to be parents. Are you happy? Emma asked, suddenly anxious. Happy, Emma, I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure. A baby, our baby. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. This is a miracle. The pregnancy was not easy. Emma was sick for weeks, unable to keep much food down, exhausted all the time. Max hovered over her constantly, worried and protective. By summer, the sickness had passed, but Emma was growing larger and more uncomfortable. The heat was oppressive, and she felt like a beached whale, unable to do many of the tasks she had taken on around the ranch. But there was joy too. Feeling the baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings inside her, watching Max's face light up when he felt the baby kick. Making plans for the nursery, choosing names, imagining what their child would look like. Summer gave way to autumn, and Emma grew larger still. By October, she could barely move without help. Max had taken over most of her chores, and Charlie was working longer hours to help with the ranch work. Emma felt guilty and useless, but Max would not hear it. You are growing our child, he told her. That is the most important job in the world. The baby came on a cold night in early November, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Emma woke with a sharp pain in her back and knew immediately that labor had begun. Max rode to town to fetch the midwife, and Emma labored through the long night with Mrs. Chen, who had come to stay with her for the last few weeks of the pregnancy, by her side. The pain was like nothing Emma had ever experienced, relentless and all-consuming. But when the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced baby in her arms, all the pain faded away. Emma looked down at her son, at his tiny perfect fingers and his shock of dark hair, and fell completely in love. Max was allowed in a few minutes later, and when he saw Emma holding their baby, tears streamed down his face. A son, he whispered. We have a son. His name is Michael, Emma said. After your father. Max could not speak. He just nodded, overcome with emotion, and gently touched his son's tiny hand. The first weeks with baby Michael were exhausting and wonderful. Emma had never been so tired in her life, up every few hours to feed the baby, never quite getting enough sleep. But she also had never been so happy. Watching Max with his son, seeing the tenderness and love in his eyes, made her fall in love with him all over again. One night, when Michael was about a month old, Emma woke to feed him and found the bed beside her empty. She frowned, listening, and heard voices from the main room. Carrying the baby, she went to investigate and found Max sitting by the fire, holding Michael and talking to him in a low, gentle voice. Your mama is the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known, Max was saying. She came all the way across the country by herself. She learned to run a ranch. She took care of everything when I was too sick to help. And she brought you into this world. You are lucky to have her as your mother, son. We both are. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Max noticed her standing in the doorway and smiled. I am sorry. I did not mean to wake you. He was fussy, so I thought I would walk him around a bit. You did not wake me. He is hungry. She took the baby and settled into the rocking chair Max had made for her, nursing Michael while Max sat nearby, watching them both with an expression of complete contentment. I love you, Emma said softly. I know I tell you that every day, but I do not think I can ever say it enough. You have given me everything, Max. A home, a family, a purpose. You saved me. No, Max said, shaking his head. You saved me. Before you came into my life, I was just existing, just going through the motions. You taught me how to live again, how to hope, how to love. You and Michael, you are my whole world. They sat together in the firelight, their son nursing contentedly, and Emma thought about how far she had come. A year and a half ago, she had stepped off that stagecoach alone and terrified, with no idea what the future held. Now she had a husband she adored, a beautiful son, and a home that she loved. The journey had been hard, full of challenges and struggles, but it had been worth every moment. "You ever think about that first morning?" Max asked, as if reading her thoughts. "When you served me breakfast at Mrs. Chen's restaurant, all the time. I thought you were handsome but too quiet," he laughed. "I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and I was terrified to talk to you. You did not seem terrified. I was. I went home that day and could not stop thinking about you. Every Thursday, I would tell myself I was just going into town for supplies, but really I just wanted to see you. Why did you wait so long to ask me to go riding with you? Fear, mostly. I could not believe someone like you would be interested in someone like me. You are educated, cultured, from a big city. I am just a rancher." Emma shifted Michael to her other side. "You are not just anything. You are the man I love, the father of my child, my partner in everything, and I have never regretted for one single moment saying yes when you asked me to marry you. Even during that terrible winter. Even then. Especially then, in some ways. That is when I learned what we are really made of, what we can survive together." Max came over and knelt beside the rocking chair, putting his arms around both Emma and Michael. "I promise you, for the rest of my life, I will do everything in my power to make you happy, to give you and our children a good life. Children, you think there will be more, I hope so, if you want them." Emma smiled. "I want them. I want a whole house full of laughter and noise and love." Michael finished nursing and fell asleep in Emma's arms. Max carefully took him and placed him in the cradle beside their bed, then helped Emma back to bed. They lay together in the darkness, Max's arms around Emma, listening to their son's soft breathing. "Can I tell you something?" Max said quietly. "About those months when I slept in the barn, of course. It was not just about protecting the animals, though that was part of it. It was also about proving something to myself. I felt like I had to be strong enough, tough enough to handle anything. My father never would have let a little cold weather drive him inside. He would have stayed out there no matter what, and I thought I had to be like him. But you almost died trying. I know. And lying there sick, being cared for by you, watching you take over all the work I had thought only I could do, it taught me something important. Being strong is not about doing everything yourself. It is about knowing when to ask for help, when to accept that you cannot do it alone. My father, for all his strengths, never learned that lesson. He worked himself into an early grave because he could not admit he needed help." Emma tightened her arms around him. "You are not your father, Max. You are your own man, and you are a better man because you can admit when you need help." "You make me better," he said simply. "You and Michael. You give me a reason to take care of myself, to not take foolish risks, because I need to be here for you both." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Emma thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of struggle or hardship, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. The years that followed were full and rich. Michael grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch. 2 years after Michael was born, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, a sweet-tempered baby with Emma's dark eyes. 3 years after that, another son whom they named James. The ranch prospered. With hard work and careful management, Max not only paid off all his father's debts but expanded the operation. They bought more land, increased the herd, built a new barn. Emma's garden became legendary in Colorado City, producing more vegetables than the family could eat. She sold the surplus in town, and the extra income helped them through the lean times. But it was not the prosperity that mattered most to Emma. It was the life they had built together, the rhythm of their days, working side by side. The evenings on the porch, watching the children play while the sun set over the mountains. The way Max still looked at her after all these years, as if she was the most precious thing in his world. The laughter that filled their house, the love that bound them all together. One evening when Michael was 10, Elizabeth was 8, and James was 5, Emma was making dinner when Michael came running in from the barn. "Mama, Mama, you need to come see." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Papa is teaching James to ride, and it is the funniest thing." Emma wiped her hands on her apron and followed her son outside. Sure enough, Max had James on one of the gentler horses, leading him around the corral while Elizabeth sat on the fence cheering. James's face was a mixture of terror and delight, and Max was talking to him in that calm, patient voice he used with nervous animals. "That is it, James. Just relax. The horse can tell when you are tense. There you go. Good boy." Emma watched from the fence, her heart full. Max noticed her and smiled, that same smile that still made her pulse quicken after all these years. He handed James's reins to Michael, telling him to take over for a minute, and came over to Emma. "Our youngest is a natural," he said proudly. "Better than Michael was at that age." "Do not let Michael hear you say that. You will hurt his feelings." Max pulled her close, right there in front of the children, and kissed her soundly. The children groaned and made faces, and Max laughed. "Let that be a lesson to you all. Your mother is still the prettiest woman in Colorado, and I am still the luckiest man alive." "You are embarrassing the children," Emma said, but she was smiling. "They will survive." That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Emma and Max sat on the porch as they had done 1,000 times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a cool breeze blew down from the mountains. "Do you remember," Emma said, "that Sunday afternoon when you brought me out to see the ranch for the first time? When you asked me to marry you? I remember every detail. You were wearing a blue dress. Your hair kept coming loose from its pins in the wind. I had never been so nervous in my life. I was terrified you were going to propose, and terrified you were not going to propose, all at the same time." Max laughed. "I had the ring in my pocket for 2 weeks before I finally worked up the courage to ask. You never told me that. I was afraid you would say no. Afraid you would realize you could do so much better than a struggling rancher." Emma turned to look at him, this man she had loved for so many years. There were lines on his face now and silver in his dark hair. His hands were scarred from years of hard work. But to her, he was more handsome than ever. "I could never have done better than you, Max Quinn. Not in 1,000 years." He pulled her close, and they sat together watching the stars, comfortable in the silence of two people who knew each other so well that words were often unnecessary. "Can I ask you something?" Max said after a while. "Something I have always wondered about, anything. That first winter when I was sleeping in the barn all those nights, you asked me once why I did it. Do you remember?" Emma thought back, trying to recall the conversation. There had been so many arguments that winter, so much stress and fear. "I am not sure I do, actually. When was this?" "It was late February, I think. I had just come in from another night in the barn, and you were so angry. You said, 'Why do you do this? Why do you keep choosing the barn over me?' And I did not have a good answer for you then, but I want you to know the answer now." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She did remember that conversation now. It had been one of their worst fights, one of the moments when she had wondered if their marriage was going to survive. "I did it because I was afraid," Max continued. "Afraid of failing you, afraid of losing everything, afraid of not being good enough. I thought that if I could just work hard enough, sacrifice enough, push myself hard enough, I could keep us safe. But I was wrong. All I did was nearly destroy the thing that mattered most. Max, that was so long ago, we worked through it. I know. But I want you to understand something. Every single day since then, I have woken up grateful that you did not give up on me, grateful that you loved me enough to fight for us. And I have tried my very best to make sure you never had to ask me that question again. Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You have given me the most beautiful life, Max, more than I ever dreamed was possible. You and our children, this ranch, this life we have built together. It is everything. You are everything, he said, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. You saved me, Emma. You took a lonely, broken man and taught him how to live again, how to love, how to hope. I was so lost before you came into my life, and I did not even know it. They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of two people who had been through everything together and come out stronger. And lying in Max's arms afterward, listening to his heartbeat, Emma thought about the journey that had brought her here. The tragedy that had driven her west, the fear and uncertainty of those first weeks in Colorado City, the wonder of falling in love with Max, the struggles of that first brutal winter, the joy of bringing their children into the world. It had not been an easy life. There had been hard times, lean years, moments of doubt and fear, but there had also been so much love, so much laughter, so many moments of quiet happiness, of looking across the room and catching Max's eye and knowing that he was thinking the same thing she was, that they were the luckiest people in the world to have found each other. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Michael grew into a fine young man, serious and hardworking like his father. At 19, he married a girl from town, the daughter of the banker, and Max deeded him a portion of the ranch to start his own operation. Elizabeth, spirited and independent, surprised everyone by deciding to become a teacher. She went to Denver for training and came back to start a school in Colorado City. James, the baby, showed a talent for working with horses and dreamed of breeding them. Max and Emma grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. When Emma turned 45, Max threw her a surprise party, inviting everyone they knew in Colorado City. Mrs. Chen was there, now very old but still sharp as ever. Charlie, who had worked for them for over 20 years, came with his wife and children. Friends and neighbors filled the house, and Emma was overwhelmed by how many lives she and Max had touched over the years. Max made a toast, standing in the middle of their crowded house with his arm around Emma. 22 years ago, a young woman stepped off the stagecoach in this town with nothing but a carpet bag and a whole lot of courage. She had lost everything and was starting over in a place she had never been, with people she did not know. I was lucky enough to meet her, luckier still that she agreed to marry me, and every single day since then has been a gift. Emma, you are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life and the mother of my children. You made me the man I am today, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Happy birthday, my love. Everyone cheered and raised their glasses, and Emma was laughing and crying at the same time. She looked around at all these people, at the life she and Max had built, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later, after the guests had left and the children had gone to their own homes, Max and Emma sat on the porch in the twilight. The ranch spread out before them, peaceful and prosperous. The mountains rose up against the darkening sky, eternal and beautiful. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not come west? Max asked. Emma considered the question. Sometimes, but I cannot really imagine it. This is my life. This is who I am. The woman I was in Philadelphia, she feels like someone from a different lifetime. Do you have any regrets? Not a single one. "Well, maybe I wish I had known about the winter cold before I agreed to move here," she said with a laugh. "But no real regrets. What about you? My only regret is all those nights I spent in the barn that first winter. All that time I could have spent with you that I wasted out there in the cold. I was so stubborn, so convinced I had to do everything myself. You were protecting what mattered to you. I understand that better now than I did then. What mattered to me was you. I just did not have the sense to see it at the time." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "We were both young and figuring things out, but we figured it out together, and that is what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared. The night sounds of the ranch surrounded them, the lowing of cattle, the chirping of crickets, the distant call of an owl. "I love you, Emma Quinn," Max said softly. "More today than yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow." "I love you too, Maxwell Quinn, forever and always." As the years went on, Max and Emma gradually stepped back from the daily running of the ranch, turning more and more responsibility over to Michael and James. They spent their time with their grandchildren, 7 in total, and with each other. They traveled a bit, taking the train to Denver and even once to San Francisco, marveling at how much the world had changed since their youth. But they always came back to the ranch, to the house Max's father had built and they had filled with love and laughter. That was home. That was where they belonged. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The whole family gathered at the ranch house, which had been expanded over the years to accommodate the growing family. There was food and music and dancing, and Emma felt like the luckiest woman alive. Max pulled her aside at one point, leading her out to the porch away from the noise of the celebration. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Max, you did not need to get me anything." "I wanted to." He pulled out a small wooden box, beautifully carved. "I made this for you. Open it." Inside the box was a pendant on a delicate silver chain. The pendant was shaped like the mountains, with a small diamond representing Pikes Peak. It was the most beautiful thing Emma had ever seen. "Max, it is gorgeous. When did you make this?" "I have been working on it for months. The box I carved myself. The pendant I had made by a jeweler in Denver. I wanted you to have something that represented what Colorado means to us. This is where our life together really began. This is where we became who we are." Emma was crying as he fastened the necklace around her throat. "I will treasure it always. I love you, Emma. Thank you for 30 years of happiness. Thank you for our children, our grandchildren, this beautiful life we have built. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I did not deserve your faith. Thank you for seeing me that first morning in the restaurant. Thank you for being patient with me while I learned how to be a rancher's wife. Thank you for loving me through everything, the good times and the bad." They kissed there on the porch, surrounded by the sounds of their family celebrating inside, and Emma thought that this was what a life well lived looked like. Not perfect, but full of love. Not easy, but worth every struggle. As Emma grew older, she sometimes thought about that young woman who had stepped off the stage coach so many years ago, frightened and alone. She wished she could go back and tell her younger self that everything would be all right, that she would find love beyond her wildest dreams, that she would build a family and a life that would bring her more joy than she could imagine, that the heartbreak and loss she had experienced would eventually give way to healing and hope. But maybe that young woman needed to walk her own path, to discover those things for herself. Maybe the journey was as important as the destination. Max's health began to decline when he was in his early 70s. He had lived a hard life, and it had taken its toll on his body. But his mind stayed sharp, and his love for Emma never wavered. On the days when he was feeling well, they would still sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their life, their children, their memories. "You remember," Emma said one evening, "the first time you brought me out here to see the ranch." "How nervous you were," Max smiled. "I thought you would take one look at this run-down place and change your mind about marrying me. I thought it was perfect, I still do. It became perfect when you moved in. Before that, it was just a house. You made it a home." Emma held his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength that was still there despite his age. "We made it a home together." They sat in silence for a while, and then Max said, "Emma, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever comes next, I want you to know that these years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. I would not change a single moment of it. Do not talk like that. You are going to be around for many more years yet. Maybe. But if I am not, I need you to promise me something, anything. Promise me you will not mourn too long, that you will keep living, keep finding joy. You have so much life in you still, Emma, so much to give. Do not let my death be the end of your story." Emma was crying now. "I cannot imagine life without you. You will not have to for a long time yet, I hope. But when that day comes, remember that I will always be with you. In every sunrise over these mountains, in every spring when the flowers bloom, in the laughter of our grandchildren, I will always be here." Max lived for another 5 years, and they were good years, full of love and family. When he finally passed, peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, Emma was beside him, holding his hand. The grief was overwhelming, a pain so deep she thought it might break her. But she remembered her promise to him, and she kept living. Her children and grandchildren rallied around her, making sure she was never alone for long. Michael and his family moved into the main house with her, and the sound of children filled the rooms once again. Emma continued to work in her garden, to cook meals for the family, to tell stories about their grandfather to the grandchildren who had not known him well. And every evening, she sat on the porch and watched the sunset, feeling Max's presence beside her. She would touch the pendant he had given her, the mountains and the diamond, and remember that first morning in the restaurant, the way her heart had skipped when he smiled at her. Remember learning to be a rancher's wife, struggling through that first brutal winter. Remember the birth of their children, the expansion of the ranch, the 1,000 small moments of joy and connection that had made up their life together. Emma lived to be 87 years old, long enough to see her great-grandchildren born, long enough to know that the legacy she and Max had built would continue for generations. And when her time finally came, on a warm spring evening with all her family gathered around her bed, her last thoughts were of Max, of the life they had shared, the love that had sustained them both. Her final words were whispered so softly that only her daughter Elizabeth, leaning close, could hear them. "I am coming, my love. Wait for me." The funeral was held on a beautiful May afternoon, and it seemed like all of Colorado City turned out to pay their respects. Emma had touched so many lives over the years, through her kindness, her generosity, her quiet strength. The family buried her next to Max on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a view of Pikes Peak in the distance. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, Michael had inscribed the words his father had said so many years ago. "She saved me. She taught me how to live, how to love, how to hope." And on Max's stone, which Emma had commissioned years before, were the words, "He gave me everything. A home, a family, a purpose. He was my whole world." The ranch continued to prosper under Michael's management, and then under his sons and his sons after that. The house Max's father had built, and Max and Emma had filled with love, remained in the family, expanded and updated over the years, but still fundamentally the same. And on summer evenings, when the light was just right and the breeze blew down from the mountains, People swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch, side by side, watching the sunset together. It was said to be good luck, a sign that the love Max and Emma had shared still blessed the land and everyone who lived there. The story of the cowboy who gave his bride his bed and slept in the barn, who nearly destroyed himself trying to protect what they had built, and the brave woman from Philadelphia who saved him, was passed down through the generations, a reminder that true love was not just about the easy times, but about standing together through the struggles, about learning and growing and choosing each other every single day. And in Colorado City, when people talked about what a good marriage looked like, they always came back to Max and Emma Quinn, the couple who had started with nothing but love and courage, who had built a life and a legacy that would last for generations. The cowboy and the city girl who had found each other against all odds and created something beautiful together. Their story became legend, but it was based on simple truth. That love, real love, was the strongest force in the world. Stronger than hardship, stronger than fear, stronger even than death. Max and Emma had proven that, living it every day of their long and happy life together. And their descendants, living on the land they had worked so hard to build, carrying forward the values they had lived by, were the ultimate proof that their love story had a happy ending after all. The ranch still stands today, still in the Quinn family, still prosperous. And on the hillside where Max and Emma are buried, wildflowers bloom every spring, painting the ground in brilliant colors. People come from all over to see it, to hear the story, to stand in the place where such a great love flourished. And if you listen carefully on those summer evenings, when the wind whispers through the grass and the mountains glow pink in the fading light, you might just hear the echo of laughter, the murmur of voices, the sound of two people who loved each other completely, perfectly, for all of their days. That is how love stories should end. Not with tragedy or loss, but with the knowledge that what was built together, what was shared and cherished, lives on forever. Max and Emma Quinn found each other when they both needed saving, and they spent their lives saving each other over and over again, every single day. Their children grew old telling their story. Their grandchildren passed it on to their own children. And somewhere in the hearts of everyone who heard it, a small seed of hope was planted, a belief that love like that was possible, that it was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth building a whole life around. The cowboy gave her his bed and slept in the barn, nearly destroying himself in the process. But she saved him as he saved her, and together they built something that would last forever. That was the real ending, the one that mattered. Not death or separation, but love that transcended everything, that became part of the very land itself, that lived on in every person who carried their blood and their name. Max and Emma Quinn, together forever, their love story complete.